I have too many freaking t-shirts. Like I made the mistake of using the system I have for storing t-shirts is like my nerd t-shirts go in hangers instead of being folded up. And I figured that's fine when I have like 2 nerd t-shirts. Now I have 1,000 nerd t-shirts, and half my closet is nerd t-shirts on hangers. I just really need more closet space. That's the main problem.
We should probably actually start the show. So we have some follow-up from all the way across the planet in Australia. John, would you like to tell us about what Wade from Australia said?
Yeah, this is the best theory I've heard so far, although it's still kind of vague and shaky because based on fake products and rumors of why a 12-inch MacBook Air might only have one USB port on it instead of 2.
Oh, jeez. I cannot wait for this thing to come out so we can stop talking about it.
Yeah, no, but like that's the worst part of the rumor. It's like, yeah, Retina screen, really thin, blah, 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 blah. But like the one they throw is like, 1 port? Why would you do that on purpose? And then you're like, I need to have a reason because it just doesn't make any sense otherwise. So this is about the PCI Express lanes. How many PCI Express lanes are supported by the Core M chipset that we assume this fake product will use? And according to Wade from Australia, it supports 12 lanes of PCI Express, 4 gigabits per lane. So that means you need more than 2 lanes per USB 3.1 port if you want the full speed, which I would assume they do. So if you start adding up the ports, you end up like with 1 lane for the PCI Express SSD and 1 for like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and stuff like that. And you can get the chipset with different combinations of lanes. And Wade's speculation is that if you can fit everything in 4 lanes, then you can get a chipset that just has those 4 lanes. You don't need to spend power like pulling the other lanes for devices. Like in other words, you could shut down some of the lanes. So you're going to need more than 4 single lanes just for USB 3.1. So you need 3 lanes for that and 2 more for the radios and the SSD. So you're already at 5. If you want to add another port, you have to bump it up at least from 5 to 8. And I guess all this depends on, do you really get a big power savings from keeping it at or under 4, at or under 5? Like, is there a point at which you have to spend, like the power budget takes a leap? Does it not scale linearly? So PCI Express lanes are a sort of the currency of the internals of modern Macs in terms of how many do you have and then what can you spend them on and stuff like that. Because once you're out of them, you're out of them. And the other thing is that USB 3.1 is not built into the chipsets. That's why you need to use PCI Express lanes on it. Like it's not integrated into the chipsets. So I buy more of these theories because it plays into hardware constraints that Apple doesn't have control over and also power saving. But, it's a speculated machine from a mock-up, and we don't know exactly what kind of trade-offs they have. And you never know what kind of crazy stuff that Apple has inside their laptops, again, with the history of the repackaged chip in the original MacBook Air. Who's to say the things that are offered by Intel right now are the things that constrain Apple specifically? So we'll wait and see.
I don't think we've ever actually seen, correct me if I'm wrong, but just off the top of my head here, I don't think we've ever actually seen Intel give Apple access to a chipset or even a chip itself that wasn't available in the market, with the one exception of the original MacBook Air. But that was only like a physical repackaging, like to make the pins smaller. But like the die was still the same as what everyone else was getting.
Well, I assume Apple would be willing to put another chip on the board that's not part of Intel's chipset. Like, oh, the chipset has this, and then we buy from whatever other weird manufacturer that we have some relationship with for iOS hardware or something, this other chip that gives. I mean, they have to add a chip anyway for the USB 3 controller, and so who's making that controller chip for them? They could probably get that company to make a special chip just for them. And I don't know. I'm not willing to rule out almost anything because Apple has such incredible volumes and such leverage with chip makers that, they more or less can't make Intel do special things for them. But at this point, like if you look at the Iris Pro graphics and everything, who has been leaning on Intel so hard for the many, many years to improve their GPUs? I would attribute a lot of Intel's recent GPU focus on the things that Apple said that it needs from them and has influenced their multi-year roadmap. They don't get it exclusively. Everybody gets it. But that kind of focus and the fact that, these chips show up in Apple's machines, I would assume there's a lot of influence there in terms of what Intel decides to make.
So we also had some feedback from Tom Holliday. He had said that the rumored 12-inch lack of Thunderbolt sorrows me. The MacBook Air plus 27-inch Thunderbolt display configuration allows sessile components. I've never heard that word before.
Oh, look it up.
I thought it was like a typo for several. I don't know.
Nope, it's not. It's a word.
Sessile.
SAT word.
Of an organism, for example, a barnacle fixed in one place or immobile. Ah, gotcha.
There's a word. I learned that word as a description of my friend's cat when I was in high school. That was the SAT word association.
Oh, wow.
Dan's cat is sessile, and it was true.
Okay, so the Thunderbolt, the MacBook Air plus 27-inch Thunderbolt display configuration allows sessile components like external hard drives, scanners, and printers, and a 27-inch display to be set up for the desktop while the MacBook retains portability.
Yeah, I put this in the notes because we talked about this in the past shows, but that all these things that you get out of Thunderbolt in terms of having multiple devices going through one particular chain, you could approximate them. You get the display. You get the USB. You could have a USB type hub thing. You can connect, you could connect hard drives through USB, and it wouldn't be maybe as nice or as fancy as Thunderbolt is. But the question that I had that this brought to mind is, does this mean, if Apple comes out with this thing and, Thunderbolt is off most of their machines and everything is USB 3, assuming they ever revise their stupid monitors, does the next equivalent of the Thunderbolt display try to replace the Thunderbolt display with one that connects just through USB? Or is that not something they're interested in anymore? Because I use the same arrangement. Like, you have a portable machine, you plug one cable into it, and then you have all the other ports that don't fit on the laptop. And it's a really nice arrangement. That will go away with this unless Apple comes out with a new display that's like their USB hub display, where the external monitor, it's one cable, you plug it in, and you get a USB hub where you can hook up all your hard drives and everything, and you also get the display all through a single cable.
I mean, I would certainly hope that they would, because I have lusted after the Thunderbolt display since it was a thing. And it's been like 2 or 3 years now, right? But anyway, I've wanted one so badly, but I'm way too cheap to buy one. And I would hope that they would still do this kind of a setup, but I am extremely skeptical that they would do this kind of a setup, because Apple just, I mean, when has Apple ever really believed in a docking station? There was that one where like the whole entire folded up laptop slid into it. Stephen Hackett is furious right now. I don't remember the name of it.
The Duo Dock.
Thank you. But I mean, other than that, like, docking station is not really a thing, which is actually kind of frustrating to me, because I work in an office full of Dells where they all have these docking stations, which are aesthetically hideous, but functionally awesome. And I kind of wish that my Mac would do something similar, but yeah, I don't know. I don't see them really putting too much effort into that.
Well, I mean, the answer to that is those like Belkin and Thunderbolt dock things, but nobody really buys those as far as I can tell.
Well, they're so expensive.
Well, I mean, now I think they're like $200 down from $300, but still, I mean, that's still a lot. But still, like, I don't know. See, I think if this is the direction Apple is going with all of their laptops, they might be concerned with things like this. But for this one model, I don't think we need to read too much into, again, this is assuming it's all correct with these rumors, but I don't think we have to read too much into it, because you guys are all talking about from the perspective of people who use laptops much of the time or most of the time as desktops with a bunch of stuff plugged into them and have these heavy external needs. I think it's a good idea for most of Apple's laptops to cater to that, because that is probably how most laptops that are sold are actually used, especially with power users, where you're plugging a bunch of stuff in and might have an external monitor and stuff. But I think there is nothing wrong with Apple having a model in the lineup that does not cater to being plugged into stuff all the time, that won't be good at that. I mean, the original MacBook Air was awful about that. The newer ones only got better because of Thunderbolt. I think there's nothing saying that Apple needs to solve the problem of lots of good external bandwidth or external ports or anything like that with this model of MacBook. I think they could be just fine with this one, mostly made to be portable, to not be used while plugged into a bunch of stuff most of the time.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something there, because now that I'm thinking about my own example of work in docking stations, I think a lot of the reason that we have the docking stations everywhere and dual monitors everywhere is just because it's nice to have it. But for non-developers, my company that I work for is probably half business consultants and half technical consultants like myself. For the business folks, I think they like having a second monitor, but I would guess that most of them would tell you, well, if it went away, whatever. And so if I think about it, typically they're not plugging in an external hard drive. Typically they're not plugging in Ethernet. Typically they're not plugging in an external monitor unless it just happens to be sitting there. So generally speaking, a lot of these folks, all they plug in is power, to your point, Marco, and that's it. And so would it really matter if this hyper portable computer only can take power in one other thing? Maybe not.
You know, this MacBook Air, two things about it, like potentially, like, can't they just have one model in the line? One, I think the rumor, maybe not this specific rumor we're talking about, the 9-to-5 Mac one, but for the past few years, it was like, oh, the 11 and the 13 are going away. It will just be replaced by a single 12. If that ends up being the case, it's fine for them to have one model that would be like this. But if you're replacing two models with it, it seems weird that, you know, for the people who wanted something ultra portable and you don't care about the ports, the 11-inch makes sense. And for the people who want a bigger, sort of more full-size laptop on the 13-inch. But if you replace them both with the 12, it's kind of weird for it to say that, oh, you can't use this one like you use the other ones, like to revert to the original MacBook Air. But there is an advantage to not using Thunderbolt, and it mostly has to do with the annoying nature of Thunderbolt. So as we have a Thunderbolt display here and a MacBook Air, and it's got the little squid type cable coming out the end of it, where it's got the MagSafe power thing to power your laptop from the monitor, and then it also has the Thunderbolt cable. And part of it is that they made the little squid tentacles too short, so that because they're on opposite sides of the MacBook Air, you have to put the Thunderbolt on the left side facing you, and the power on the, or whatever is the opposite, the power on the left side and the Thunderbolt on the right. And the Thunderbolt connector, because it has a chip in the connector itself, it sticks out like an inch from the computer with this big, inflexible, the hard plastic part of the connector. And it's just it's not great. Like the cables are at sharp angles, and it makes the thing wider, and it's not nice looking. With the USB thing, even though it can't do all the things that Thunderbolt can do, one, the cable won't have a giant inch-long hard plastic connector sticking out of it. It can be a much, smaller, more flexible thing. And two, if they combine the power with it, you also won't need to have the split squid thing where you have the MagSafe on one side and, you will literally be able to plug in just one cable instead of right now, it's one cable, but it splits in two at the end. And that splitting is kind of annoying. Every time you take it apart, you got to take it, pull the things out from each other, and then it slides behind the thing. If you just have one little cable that was a USB cable, it would be easier to sort of plug and unplug. And I'm generally anti-dock because of the whole docking procedure being awkward. I'd much rather just put it down on the desk and plug in one small cable.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Our first sponsor this week, Harvest is a beautiful business tool for tracking time spent on client projects. With Harvest, no matter where you find yourself working, the focus stays on the task at hand. You can start a timer from anywhere via your web browser, desktop, or mobile device, and you can track the hours that you work on with your projects. Tracked hours appear in these beautiful visual time reports, and then when the project's all done, you can create an invoice with billable hours right in Harvest. Well, who am I kidding? The project never really done, is it? But when it's time for them to pay you, you can create an invoice with billable hours right there in Harvest. They give you the tools, the data, and these awesome visualizations that are designed to keep projects on time and within budget. So that way you can actually look and you can see like which clients and projects are actually making money for you and which ones are actually costing you money. You might want to really reevaluate whether you need to break up with them or not. So go to getharvest.com and use coupon code ATP for 50% off your first month. Now, Casey, you're a consultant.
Indeed.
How is the world of time tracking out there? I've only been a consultant briefly, so I don't really know much about it. Is this a problem? Is this a challenge?
It's a challenge if you're doing more than one thing at once. I'm lucky enough that generally speaking, I only have one client. I come in, I work all day on that one client's one thing, and then I go home. But that wasn't always the case for me. And actually, and this is a true story, I taught myself C# by writing a time tracking app for myself. So
I think it's pronounced C#.
Right. I taught myself C#. God, we're going to get so much hate mail. I taught myself C#. I did that by writing a really, really crappy time tracking app. And this is so much better than that. And certainly a lot more modern since it was not written 10 years ago. But it's so nice when you have multiple projects or multiple clients to be able to just snap between them and not have to think, okay, well, shoot, I barely remember what I had for lunch, but I know from 8 to 8:20, I was on the phone. From 8:20 to 829, I think it was. I was working on this. It's a nightmare. And so having an app or having a system to do this is really way, way, way better.
So check it out. Go to getharvest.com. Start tracking your time painlessly. There's a 30-day free trial. When you're finished with your trial, use coupon code ATP at checkout. Save 50% off your first month. This offer is only good till April 1st, so don't slack off. Do it now. Check it out today. Getharvest.com. Coupon code ATP. Thanks a lot to Harvest for sponsoring our show once again and letting Casey track his hours with C # perfectly fine.
Yeah, one more thing I'll add to this follow-up item about the power. We briefly mentioned it before, but it's worth mentioning again. The idea, we talked about, get rid of MagSafe. Can you power it through USB? Yes, you can. Well, despite that you could either use MagSafe or USB, people also are interested in the idea of powering it the way the watch is powered, with a thing that doesn't plug into it, but a thing that sort of attaches to the outside.
Oh, please don't. Please.
Yeah, and
that's such a bad idea.
And I don't think that makes any sense because, USB will work. We know that. It'll be fine. I'm not sure what the advantage would be to having a big, warty sort of, metal thing that you place on top of it. The space is already at a premium, and I'm not sure where you would put that. And then who wants to have a bunch of connectors with a big circle metal thing? I'm not even sure how that'll work with the watch. Another thing is having some kind of pad or something to use inductive charging where you put it on the pad and it charges. That is a little bit better appeal because then you're not plugging stuff in, you're just chucking it down and you put stuff on the pad. I'm not sure how fast those chargers are, but it could be done. But the problem pads have is I think you still need something that you plug in because you've got a pad in the place where you put it in your home, but when you travel, do you want to travel with a big pad or a little adapter? Having something that the smallest possible thing that you can plug in would be nice. Someone in the chat room asked, why would the pad have to be big? Well, if it's small, then you're worrying about alignment issues or something. The whole idea is you just want to put the thing down somewhere and not align it and not stick a little warty thing on it. Plugging a little tiny thing into a little tiny port is actually very straightforward and fast compared to, at least in the past, the type of things that they've had where you put your phone down on a certain pad or whatever. That's why you want it to be kind of like a big thing where it doesn't matter where you put it, just put it anywhere, it'll charge, it'll be fine. So that's possible, but Apple really hasn't gone there, and I think it mostly has to do with just the space that type of solution would take up, and the fact that plugging in seems to work. And the final one, which I think is the most fun one, it was brought to my attention by someone whose name is now lost to the mist of time. Someone sent me a link to a YouTube video called Witricity for wirelessly sending power. We'll put links to it in the show notes. The website is witricity.com. You can take a look at it. And it made me recall our past conversations about the Artemis P-Cell stuff for sort of doing targeted wireless to avoid interference and everything, where you pre-calculate the sort of interference map of all the different sources of wireless, and you focus the signal destined for your laptop right on your laptop. And one of the vague, rumory, kind of hinty things was and we might be able to use this for something more than just sending data. And I think that was a hint at we could do wireless power, because once we have the ability to focus a particular signal on a particular location, we can power things that way as well. Both of those seem crazy to me, but crazy in a fun way. I guess you could accidentally slowly bake the inside of your hand if it's aiming the wireless power at the wrong spot and it's sort of microwaving your hand. That would be bad. But I don't know, all these things that are possible, because every time powering stuff comes up, people are this is not new technology. Inductive stuff is not new. Wireless power is not new. This is things that work. Someone will bring up Nikola Tesla and say that we had this hundreds of years ago, and just, whatever. The physics and the technology behind it all seems to be there, but the products that people, it hasn't caught on to the degree that other technology has, where usually, if something is going to gain traction, really high res screens, do people really want that? Yeah, they more or less do. Even though they can't really tell, it just catches on, it goes through everything, and pretty soon the giant chunky pixels will be gone from handheld devices, just because it's better, it's unequivocally better, everybody likes it better, you can do more things with it, look sharper, even if most people can't tell, it's good. Inductive charging, wireless power, all those things have not made that breakthrough. Is it because they just haven't been done right? Or is it because the thing they're trying to replace is not as annoying as people think it is, and people don't mind just plugging something in and it's more straightforward? Or I don't know. but I would love to see one of these things. I've never used any of these for any appreciable period of time, but I'd love to see one of them actually end up being like the new thing, because all of them have that sci-fi kind of feel where it's like plugging things in. It's like, Back to the Future, which we should celebrate. Back to the Future Part 2, which should celebrate because we are now in the year of Back to the Future Part 2, where he sees the name of the video game in the future diner. What the hell was that?
I haven't seen Back to the Future 2 in years.
Anyway, Marty McFly goes over to it and he picks up the little plastic like gun thing at the screen. Like, use your hands. It's like a baby's toy. Well, you plug it in. How barbaric. We're not there yet, but it would be cool.
John, I love that Marco and I have beaten you down to the point that you have to go on a preamble to make your pop culture reference make sense.
I just couldn't remember what the name of the thing was. I can't. No one in the chat room has it yet. Faith was here; she would know. It's like a Western shoot 'em up game. Wild Gunman. Someone in the chat room thinks. I can't tell if that's right. Anyway, I'm old.
Oh goodness.
No, I mean, I think everyone who's searching for all these crazy complex systems of charging this theoretical rumored laptop, I think, John, what you said a minute ago, like almost all of these, even if they worked, would probably be more annoying or have other big downsides in practice. The fact is, if it still has any ports at all, then it's worth just charging it with a cable, because that's going to be better. No matter what kind of cable that is, that's going to be better than any other kind of weird induction or wireless or, mat induction or clip-on induction kind of schemes. Like it's just none of those things. If you actually think about what it would be like to use them in practice, in real life, I just don't think any of those things would be overall less annoying and better than just a decent cable. And they already have decent cables. MagSafe is pretty good. Like there's nothing wrong with MagSafe. And if they end up using the USB power thing to do that, that's probably going to be perfectly fine too. It's probably not a big deal. The only reason the watch has to do it really is because the watch is water sealed. So the watch has no openings. So they had to do some kind of other system besides a cable that just plugs in. And it clips onto this giant... is the back plate sapphire or is it ceramic or something? It's something that's not metal, because if you would clip with MagSafe this giant metal disc onto a metal laptop, it would scratch the hell out of it. Just like the iPad 3 smart cover, or the iPad 2 smart cover, the metal one. So all of these things are like they're searching for solutions to what really isn't that big of a problem, which is a laptop that has any ports at all can still have a power plug, and that'll be fine.
Fair enough.
You don't think there's anything wrong with MagSafe?
I will admit I liked MagSafe 1 better than MagSafe 2. MagSafe 2 comes out accidentally more easily in the vertical direction when pressed. But it's not that bad. Like, other than that, that's my only problem with it.
I'm a little bit... I think that the weakness of MagSafe, both versions, is the tiny little contacts. I've seen a lot of pictures of and stories about MagSafe things that somehow either got misaligned or something wedged in there or something caused a short inside that little tiny area, because everything is so fine, and like you just need one little iron filing from a silly kid's toy to float in over there, and you plug it in and it fries the thing. And it would be nice if it wasn't that if it was more resistant to stuff. I'm not sure what you would replace it with though, because I think the tiny USB connectors probably have the same problem maybe. But yeah, I agree that MagSafe 2 is worse than 1, but I'm not sure with the shrinking sizes. I'm not sure what you can do to MagSafe to make it better while also making it smaller. Whereas something that plugs in, again, it comes down to the question we talked about before. If the USB 3 connector, the tiny little one, does that come out just as easily as MagSafe when you trip over the cable, or does it not? Like, at what size does it start becoming like, this is just as good as MagSafe in terms of trip resistance? And I don't know until someone buys one of these things or buys some other USB 3 device and starts tripping over it.
All right, can we move on to any other topic?
Yes, we have corrections for you and John with regard to reliability probability.
Oh my God!
I don't think they're really corrections, because both of us tried. Yeah, because both of us tried so hard to stay away from the math part. Like, we didn't want to talk about the math; we just hand waved it, and yet the hand waving, because we used mathematical words about like addition, additive, and multiplicative, then that was enough to trigger the math people to come tell us how wrong we were. Like, I think we all knew we were going to be wrong. We didn't know the math, but there's two posts about this. Actually, there was a good email about it too, which unfortunately we can't link the email, but it was too long and complicated to explain. But Dr. Drang has one explaining the actual math of the probability stuff. Kieran Healy has one explaining what he thinks we probably meant, and I think he's closer. If I had to re-summarize this discussion, I would say there are 2 points, both not involving math. One is the idea that if you have something with a certain reliability and you add a second thing, even if the reliability is just as good as the first thing, if for your entire system to be successful, they both have to work, you've decreased the reliability of your system, even though the thing you added is just as reliable as the other thing. So that was one counterintuitive thing that people might not think of. It's like, oh, well, if I add the second thing and it's just as reliable as the first thing, the total reliability is the same. No, it's worse. So that's one. And the second thing is the sort of, I don't want to use this phrase because it's probably wrong, but I'll say it anyway, network effect of when you add more and more devices. You had 3 devices, and when you had one before, you don't get 3 times the number of things you can do, because if they all interact with each other, the number of possible connections and interactions between them goes up much faster than linearly. And that's the sort of multiplicative effect that I think Marco was the first one to mention.
Yeah, the handshake problem, right?
Right. Yeah, that by adding, you may add one device and then another one, and you don't just get 3 times the number of things that you can do. You get much, much more than that if they all interact with each other. And so the first point combined with the second means that the sort of intuitive sense that when I have a computer, there's one thing, and I have a computer and a phone, that's 2 things. And it should be roughly like, it should, first people would think if the phone is just as reliable as the computer, my total system reliability has not gone down, but it totally has, because if they both don't, for features that cross between them or for syncing issues or whatever, it's much worse than just having a phone or just having a computer. And the second thing is, as you get even more devices, the number of connections between them, possible interactions, goes way up, goes up faster than linearly, especially if they all interact with each other, especially if some features on one aren't even unlocked until you get the second one. Like continuity is not even in your world unless you have 2 devices. So there's a whole new feature set that wasn't even there before that blooms on both of them, and then you have the interaction between them, and then 3 of them, and then the cloud and everything like that. That's more or less what we were getting at. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty details of the math, Dr. Drang has a good coverage there. And the person who sent us an email said that even though things do get worse when you add something to a system, if most things are generally reliable, like if the reliability is 99% or whatever, it doesn't get that bad. So the effect is, maybe we're exaggerating the effect, because it's not like, we use an example like 50% reliability. Yes, that you'd really feel. If most things are very, very reliable, adding another one to the system of the same reliability is not going to pull down your overall reliability that much. So that's why I think Kieran's post about the number of possible interactions between the different devices going up is the real thrust of what we were getting at.
You with us, Marco?
And we still don't know the math. We stubbornly refuse to address or learn any of the math. This will not be on the test.
People believe John.
Yeah, no, but that's what I said. I wasn't strongly advocating for any specific thing. We were both saying, stay away from the math. We both don't know it. Look it up if you care.
The look it up if you care should be the motto of our feedback.
Oh, no, it's like, we're neither one of us off the top of our head was going to say this is definitively how you calculate this or whatever. We both just hand waved it and ran away from it, and we still got yelled at. So what can you do?
Well, I'll tell you what you can do. You can patronize our second sponsor this week. It is Backblaze. Go to backblaze.com/ATP for unlimited unthrottled backup at just $5 a month. Now, if you're not backing up yet, why? You have no excuse. They make it so easy. $5 a month. That's it. Unlimited, unthrottled online backup. I can tell you I've used multiple online backup programs, and Backblaze is by far my favorite. They have over 100 petabytes of data backed up. I don't even know where that is. Is that after Tera, or is that 2 after Tera?
I don't know.
100 petabytes of data backed up anyway. You can restore files very easily. You can do it online. You can have them mail you a hard drive. You can even do it with with their mobile apps for iOS or Android. And so you can, for example, you can restore just 1 or 2 files. If you just need a couple files and you're on vacation somewhere, maybe you only have your laptop or your iPad or your iPhone or even your Android phone, and you need a file off your home computer. You can do that with Backblaze. You can go on and restore just that file and have it right there on the go. In fact, they say 25% of their restores are just for one file. You can really do. It's a really fantastic way to get access to anything you have whenever you want. They've restored over 6 billion files. And Backblaze runs natively on Macs and even on Yosemite. It even runs in dark mode without messing up your menu bar look. They are really very Mac conscious. It was actually founded by ex-Apple engineers, so it is a very Mac-friendly app. It's native code. This isn't like some Java app or anything. It's native code running on the Mac. It's a nice menu bar thing, and I think it's a pref pane also. Yeah, it's a system pref pane, and it's just great. I've been running it for years myself. We have multiple terabytes backed up there from my house, and it's fantastic. There's no add-ons, there's no gimmicks, there's no additional charges. It is just $5 per month per computer, and that gives you unlimited space, unthrottled speeds. Get a risk-free trial with no credit card required. This is a real free trial, no credit card required at backblaze.com/ATP. Go now. It is seriously very, very easy. Go to backblaze.com/ATP. Thanks a lot to Backblaze for sponsoring once again.
There's been a rumor that the iPad Pro might, which we don't even know exists, might come with a stylus, which is something different.
So what are we going to do? Oh, a stylus, right? We're going to use a stylus. No. No. Who wants a stylus? You have to get them and put them away and you lose them. Yuck. Nobody wants a stylus. So let's not use a stylus.
Yeah. If you see a stylus, then what is it? They've already failed.
If you need a stylus, you've already failed.
The point is, one of the more reliable supply chain, analysts, I say, because I don't know, I hate that term. But anyway, has said that the next iPad, the 13-inch iPad will have an optional stylus. And I don't think that most of us would have paid too much attention to this, or certainly I wouldn't have, except that this particular individual has an unbelievably good track record, which makes me think, okay, maybe this is real. So I don't own any styluses for my iPad. I've never gotten any. I've never really had a particular need for them. I've tried the paper pencil.
Yep, I got one of those too. It sits in a drawer.
It seemed cool, I guess, but I'm just not one that needs a stylus. So I don't think I can really comment intelligently on this. It sounds like, Marco, you have a bunch, because you've spoken fondly of the Cosmonaut in the past, right?
Yeah, and of all the ones I have, that's my favorite one for general usage. If you use Paper a lot, like the app Paper by 53, if you use that app a lot for like artistic purposes and sketching purposes, their stylus offers some features in that app that other ones won't have. The Paper Pencil. For general use around the rest of the iPad, I don't think the Pencil is better than the Cosmonaut. I think it's about the same, if not a little bit worse, because it has a little bit of a weird shape. And the thing is, the reason why it's a big deal if Apple makes one of these is because if Apple makes a stylus, it's not going to be a $25 capacitive foam tipped stick the way all the other ones are. It's going to be integrated with the OS and with the hardware. So right now, the reason why the styli on the market generally all suck, or that they've basically hit a wall that they can't get any better than this, is because to get better than that, you need system-wide recognition of Bluetooth and more precision on the tip. And so certainly, like the Paper by 53 stylus, I'm pretty sure it is Bluetooth. It's some kind of wire. Yeah, it must be. So that is Bluetooth, but it only works in their app. And it's still not as good as it can be because the app has to try to do things like reject the side of your palm touching the screen and not count that as a touch and things like that. And the low-level OS frameworks for touch recognition have way more recognition and way more data to work with than what's exposed to apps in the public APIs. And so if Apple did this at the system level, they could not only use Bluetooth or some other kind of short-range RF thing, probably be Bluetooth, but they could not only use Bluetooth, but they could do it system-wide so it would work in every app with all the sensitivity and precision, and it would be able to tie in with the touch recognition and do better touch rejection and things like that. None of which third-party styluses can do really very well or everywhere right now. So that's why it's a big deal if Apple makes one. They might even, if this is going to be a big deal, They might even switch to the different kind of touchscreen. I believe it's a resistive touchscreen, or at least be able to put in a layer like that, like what the Wacom Cintiqs use, which is what the Microsoft Surface Pro, at least the 2 and the 3. I don't know if the original one did. I think it did, but the Surface Pro uses this too, where it's basically it's like a pen tablet integrated into the screen, and artists love these things. They are, if you're a sketch artist or an illustration artist that would use a pen for your art form, these things are very, very widely recognized, very, very widely appreciated, and the iPad really doesn't do a very good job at that because of the imprecisions and limitations of the styluses that are available now. So I think if they did this, and I think they probably should do this, I think there's a market for it. It would make sense to limit it to only one model and to make it like a high-end thing. That would make sense, just like Microsoft has done, really, and just like Wacom has done. I don't know. By the way, I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. I don't know what I usually even say Wacom because it's more fun to me, just like the F and key. But so anyway, I think it's a very good idea. I don't know if they'll actually do it, but I think it's a very good idea.
I think it's inevitable because, for the same reason I think the bigger iPad is inevitable and multitasking and multi-windowing on the iPad is inevitable. Like that this platform has to expand to do more things because people like it better than the old platform. And you have to make it expand slowly and make it not lose as much of the advantages and diversify the line so a particular product does it. But it has to happen because, the amazing number of artificial fingers for sale for iOS devices just goes to show that there is a market demand for this in the same way that people wanted bigger phones, right? And that's why, you said but that's why all the existing ones stink, because all they are is artificial fingers. Like all you are is simulating a finger, and the OS is made for fingers, and simulated fingers or real fingers or whatever, it's just a bunch of fingers, and they're big squishy things, they're imprecise or whatever. If Apple comes out with a stylus, not only does it have to deal with Bluetooth, but I think they have to do something different with the screen, like you said. And if you look at the huge number of patents that have come out of Apple patents a million things. Doesn't mean they're going to make anything. But I think in the case of the stylus, even if we didn't see any patents, I would think that a stylus is going to eventually come when we get to that point. And Apple has tons of patents related to styluses or styli or whatever. I wish we knew what the plural of that was, because this is going to be awkward for the whole time we talk about this. We should put that in a follow-up for next week.
Please, if you took Latin in high school, don't write in.
Yeah,
we don't care.
Mouses, mice. Anyway.
I also took Latin in high school.
Why would they have all those patents? Usually their patents are about user interface stuff. Like maybe they tried this user interface and it wasn't great, so they didn't ship it, but they're going to patent. They patent everything. You patent anything you do. But the number of stylus-related patents that have come out of Apple over the years shows that they've had people doing stuff related to styluses or styli or whatever for so long that why are those guys still doing that? It's not like they just tried this experiment once. Like just year after year after year, people are in the lab with these little sticks doing stuff. And maybe they hate all those. Maybe everything they patented is something they're not going to make. But someone is being employed at Apple to do stuff that produces things that are patentable related to drawing with a stick on a screen. So it seems to me that that is definitely something that they're working on, not just once, but over the years. And they're eventually going to get something they like. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but I think it's inevitable. And if they don't hurry up, like the Surface getting the cachet with the artist, because finally it was a portable tablet type thing that had the hardware support for a decent stylus interface. If Apple doesn't do it soon enough, eventually it's going to be like, well, every artist knows that if you want to do art on the road, you have to get a Microsoft Surface, because you're not going to use a big plastic finger to scribble on an iPad, right? So I would say now is the correct time for them to do something. I hope they do something that is at least as good as what the Surface does. And I'm really hoping that at least one or two of those weird patents are something we haven't seen before, because patents take a long time to come out. Something we haven't even seen that's patent pending will provide an interface that's even better. Now, the scary ghost floating around this has nothing to do with drawing pretty pictures on your iPad, and has everything to do with the other thing that you might do with a pen or a pencil or writing implement on a flat surface, which is write letters. And that's, as in characters, as in A, B. And Apple has big, scary egg freckles all over this topic. But see, the thing is, once you make a stylus and you're able to, do fine art with it or whatever, are you going to say, no, you can't write notes that will translate into text. I mean, that's one way to get out of it, just to avoid it entirely. Say it's just for drawing. No, you can write words, but it'll just state like we won't translate that into text. But boy, I think there's no way for them to avoid having to resurrect and finally defeat the ghosts of the Newton by doing handwriting recognition that is not embarrassing. And I think the technology is there to do it. And I think they more or less have to support it system-wide in a nice way. And I think very few people will use it because who likes writing with a pen and a pencil? Everyone who likes writing will send us email, which is fine. But I really feel like
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it that much either, but that's a pretty big group that does.
I don't. Is that here's the thing. Who, in what context are you going to use it? I can imagine using it for things like checking things off or scribbling a quick little note without bringing up the keyboard to tap things out. But I can't imagine someone using it to do text messages or write a long email or something. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I just don't see that anymore. But like, if you're going to write a long, unless it does cursive, because people are really fast with cursive, because those are the type of people who like to write handwriting. Unless they tackle cursive, which I
Those
think
people are jerks.
to just do a long handwritten letter in cursive and have it translate that into text for you. But having really good stylus support in this day and age, you can let them write it in cursive and just send it as a giant image. Like you can do that now. That wasn't an option before. You had to translate it to text. I think now this beautiful handwriting, that people have, or they want to convey that you want to see someone's handwriting. Why not just transfer it as a vector or a bitmap or something like that? Why do you have to turn it into text? I guess you have to turn it into text to make it searchable and so on and so forth. And I don't know. There's lots of different ways where they can go with this, but I think the art angle is a slam dunk. They're going to do it. It's going to be good, I hope. If it doesn't happen this year, they better hurry up because everyone else is doing it. And then the handwriting thing, I have no idea what they're going to do, and I see all sorts of crazy pitfalls there.
I think the opportunity is big. I would be surprised if anybody at Apple with the ability to make such a decision would restrict or stay away from these areas because of the Newton. I think they just don't care anymore. That was so long. That was ancient history, and most of the public doesn't even remember the Newton and doesn't even care about it.
Not stay away from it because of the Newton, but because it's still a hard problem. Like, look at how, like, the Surface does it now. Microsoft does it, and they do it obviously better than the Newton, right? You got way more computing power.
Well, and they've been doing it for like a decade. Microsoft's been doing it for a long time, and their version is pretty good.
It's good, but it's like, here's the thing with it's not so people don't need to remember what the Newton is. It's just like it's a hard enough problem, kind of like a lot of the stuff. And unfortunately, we're not going to talk about this week because I don't think any of us had time to watch it. But the Windows 10 announcement and the holographic stuff, or in the past the Kinect or whatever, things that are
that was real,
things that are really hard problems that make a really awesome tech demo that make you feel like you're living in the future. But if they don't deliver on it, like if they don't cross the threshold, like kind of like how Siri didn't cross the threshold in the beginning of like, well, it demos well, but if it doesn't quite work for you enough of the time, you just kind of give up on it. And that came up again because Daniel Jakob was talking about how Siri has gotten much better, and that went around the sort of Apple nerd sites this past week or so.
Oh, by the way, about that. So sorry to interrupt for a second. So I have not used Siri in a long time because it just never works for me. Like the reliability was so bad for so long, I just stopped trying. Because I would say a complete command, it would sit there and spin for 20 seconds and then say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. There's been an error." So I stopped trying. After seeing all these things about Siri, I'm like, all right, maybe I'll give it another shot. First thing I try yesterday, Siri, start the stopwatch.
Sorry, Marco, I can't help you with the stopwatch.
It can do everything else in the clock app. It can't start the stopwatch.
Yep.
Like, really? Come on. This is easy stuff. Why?
Oh, but at least it worked. It understood what you said and gave you a reasonable answer. But it's similar in that, like, the Siri is kind of bad, or any kind of voice recognition thing. You just let a kid use it, and you'll see it. Because, like, as soon as you start talking to it and it talks back to you, people are like, oh, well, I guess this is a complete human, and if it doesn't do exactly what I say, I consider it stupid, right? And handwriting recognition is similar. As soon as it changes anything you write into text, you're like, oh, it understands handwriting. And then you write something else and it doesn't. You're like, this thing is stupid, because you're only analog for something that understands spoken text and can read handwriting is other humans. And it's like, well, if you can read this word on the shopping list, why couldn't you read this one? There's no, to a human being, if you can read one of those words, you can read both. Like, one is not incredibly sloppier than the other, but to a computer, which is not like a human and not even close, it's not even at the level of like a kindergarten student in terms of recognizing letters. It just has a bunch of heuristics, and sometimes they get tripped up by things that make no sense to you because you have no idea how it's recognizing things. You also have no idea how your own brain is recognizing things, but it just works in us, right? Our brains just work. That's the real, it just works, right? We can be taught to read and write. It just works, right? For the most part, in most people.
Yeah, I still can't read all these cursive cards I get from old people.
You got dyslexia, and you've got people who are out of practice, and you've got people with terrible handwriting. But handwriting recognition is a promise that if you don't pass a certain bar, it's like, that's why I think the bitmap thing is a way out, because maybe you try to do handwriting recognition. Even if you do it better than Microsoft, I still think that's below the minimum that will be acceptable by the general public, where people will say, oh, it understands your handwriting. What they'll say instead is, sometimes it kind of understands your handwriting, which is not a ringing endorsement. But if you can use it to send bitmaps of your writing, then your only problem is the person at the other end can read your writing. And we've all had that where, a spouse writes a shopping list for you and you can't make out whatever the last word is. And you're not sure if it's like carrots or cucumbers or something with a C and then a bunch of squiggles. So if humans can't do it sometimes, I don't know. I think that is a difficult thing. And really, we're mostly talking about tablets here. I can't imagine someone doing it on the phone, but once you have it working on the tablet, do you put it in the 6 Plus? So a little place to put a stylus or something? Would you see? I mean, I know people see this now. Someone with the Galaxy Note or whatever, holding a big giant phone and stabbing at it with a little pencil thing. My own mother uses a little fake finger thing to stab at her iPod Touch. Some people just want to poke something with a stick. Have you seen that? Have you seen people using a phone with a stylus? Obviously not an Apple phone.
Not a phone. I have my father-in-law uses his iPad very often with the Cosmonaut. Like he just prefers to interact with it that way. It's just tapping UI buttons and everything. And I totally get that. I don't know. I think the era of Apple sticking with a very small product line, I don't think they're really holding dearly to that. I mean, just look at the iPad lineup. Like you mentioned earlier about the new 12-inch MacBook Air thing, possibly needing to replace the 11 and 13 Air. And even that, not anytime soon, maybe not ever, because they are fine having a bigger lineup. I think the Tim Cook era, and this didn't start with Tim, it started with Steve, but certainly I think the Tim Cook era has expanded this of Apple is fine keeping old products around and having more versions of new products now to address markets that they weren't serving before that were possibly a threat to them.
I think they're sticking to we remember the old quadrant thing with pro consumer, laptop, desktop. That was a simpler time, right? There was no watches, no phones, no tablets, whatever. But within their product setup, it's not crazy. They have a laptop line that they have more or less simplified by trying to, MacBook Pro and MacBook versus the Air and, getting rid of the non-Pro MacBooks and everything or whatever. They have tablets, they have phones, they have laptops in a couple varieties, they have desktop in a couple varieties. What they're doing is within those sort of nameplates and brands, diversifying how many different iPads are there. But for the simplification thing is it's just an iPad. You don't have to know do I want an iPad or another tablet product? They're all iPads, perception wise, and all it is just buying different sizes of clothing or whatever. It's it's as if a car manufacturer had one kind of car, and you could get that car in SUV, wagon, tricycle, motorcycle, but they called it all the same, line of things. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not quite that big, but
actually, that's not that far from what BMW actually does.
It's true, but but in Apple's world, the 3 and the 5 series would not be different cars, right? And maybe you'd have the electric one would be a different line. I think the iPad is the best example because these are all iPads, and it's they're all rectangles with screen, but huge diversity of different guts, different outsides, different form factors, and the phone has slowly been diversified. They're all iPhones. It's just what variety of iPhones, and there's a range there as well. The iPod Touch is off in the corner or whatever. So with the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, maybe there's still a little division there, but they're kind of unified in a MacBook. So I think Apple's appetite for taking existing product lines and just making more varieties is demonstrated, but their appetite for splitting, say, the MacBook line, further splitting into MacBook, MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, MacBook whatever, I think they're going the other direction, making everything, getting rid of the plastic models, making it all aluminum, getting rid of the non-pro MacBooks. And, who knows how long the Air, if this new one is called like MacBook Stealth and the Airs go away or something, I don't know. That kind of diversification is like having your cake and eating it too, because you address more of the customer base while still making it seem like you only need to have, 2 or 3 tables in an Apple store and you can put all your products on them.
Our final sponsor this week is lynda.com, Lynda.com. Lynda.com is an easy and affordable way to help you learn with high-quality, easy-to-follow video tutorials. You can instantly stream thousands of courses created by experts on software, web development, graphic design, and more. Go to lynda.com/ATP to see for yourself. They have fresh new courses added daily. They have courses for all experience levels, whether you're a beginner or advanced or everything in between. Every lynda.com course is produced at the highest quality, not like the inconsistent homemade videos on YouTube. Courses are broken into bite-sized pieces so you can learn at your own pace and learn from start to finish, or just jump in and find a quick answer if you're looking for reference. Tools include searchable transcripts, playlists. You can even learn while you're on the go with lynda.com's apps for iPhone, iPad, and Android. My favorite thing about lynda.com is that you can watch whatever you want with no restrictions on do I have to pay per video? Because it's unlimited. You pay one low monthly price of $25, and that gives you unlimited access to over 100,000 video tutorials. This is great. If you're like me, I like to know a little about a lot, and I like to jump in and learn, as I need to for different new things I have to do. So for me, when I started editing this podcast, I jumped in and I looked at some tutorials on Logic, on audio compressors and dynamic settings and things like that. And it was great. I loved it for that. Anyway, they also offer an annual premium plan, which allows you to download courses offline for offline viewing into your iPhone, iPad, or Android app and sample project files. Now, lynda.com has all sorts of courses you might love. You can do app and web development. As I mentioned earlier, you can do Creative Suite type stuff. So you can do audio, video production, Photoshop, Illustrator, Microsoft Office, Final Cut, stuff like that. You can even do business strategies like business negotiating for a raise, leadership, stuff like that. They have all sorts of courses on all sorts of topics that are useful for almost everybody. They're so useful, actually, that 30% of colleges and universities actually provide lynda.com subscriptions to their students. That's how useful they are. So anyway, go to lynda.com, lynda.com/ATP. You can get a 10-day free trial. Used to be 7 days, now it's 10. It's even better. 10-day free trial. Watch as many courses as you want for those 10 days. lynda.com/ATP. And once you decide to sign up, you can get unlimited access to their entire catalog for just $25 a month. Thanks a lot to lynda.com. Really, I recommend the service. It is great. lynda.com/ATP.
So CES has already ended by a week or two. Is that right?
It's always hard to tell with CES, if it's a real thing, if anything matters. I wonder if we can just paste in The Verge's summary of CES from last year and just paste it in this year. Would anybody notice?
Anyone who isn't John would have no idea that it was the same thing regurgitated. But John would notice, and John has noticed.
Well, the first thing I have in here related to this is the Wirecutter did what they do, which is they distill it down to the things they thought were actually interesting and important out of CES. And CES actually is an important show if you care about consumer electronics. But there is so much there that it's what is the important thing this year? And so for me, I'm interested in televisions every year at CES. It's what do the new crop of televisions look like? Because, people tend to announce their upcoming things that do they have new technologies? Is this the first year? The first year an LCD TV is available. The first year an HD TV is available. And those are the exciting years where there's some kind of technological advance. And then there are all the in-between years where you're okay, what is this current year's crop of plasma TVs like? Are they better than last year's crop? And so on and so forth. Those are more boring. That's just picking televisions as one category. But for every category, there's something like that. And then there's just tons and tons of noise. So the Wirecutter thing gives a good summary. Out of the Wirecutter summary of interesting gadgets and stuff from CES, I'm really interested in the TV part. So that's the only part I've highlighted here, but we'll put the link in the show notes and you can check it out. Because you can't, if you try to follow CES coverage, you can't. It's just, there's too much stuff. And a lot of the times the things that are covered by sort of live from CES stuff are the things that demo well, but you're never going to see them again. It's not a real product. It's not a real thing, but the booth and the demo is impressive, and then just forget that it exists because you'll never see anything about it again. But the technology stuff, which is like more of the boring written stories that does not have anything fun to look at, it's just announcements of products. This is just, I mean, we talked about it last year and on the television front. 4K television and the technologies related to that are slowly, steadily marching forward. 4K, we don't probably care too much about because of the size of the televisions we have and the distance we sit from them. It's probably not a factor, but as we discussed last year, 4K comes with more than just higher resolution. It also comes for a larger color gamut, different frame rates, and all sorts of stuff like that people will notice. And then the one I was really interested in last year was this crazy, this is not really a product, tech demo type thing from Dolby, which was like high dynamic range to be able to have darker darks and brighter brights in your television. And that is something much more so than 4K that you would notice if you put a regular TV next to one with this high dynamic range thing. You would be able to tell the difference immediately in the same way that most people could with high definition television versus standard def. And the exciting but boring announcement related to that is this UHD Alliance, which is a consortium of a bunch of people who make hardware and a bunch of people who make content to try to get together on these standards, because you don't want this to turn into a weird format war or whatever. If any of these things, if any of this sort of enhanced 4K with high dynamic range, if that's ever going to become a thing, it can't be confined to one vendor. It can't be confined to one distributor. And I think now it's good to see that the companies at least understand this a little bit. At various times they've been good and bad about this, like getting together on, making a decision on Blu-ray finally after having the HD DVD thing, or I think CDs, they kind of came together a little bit. It's always an argument over who owns the patents and who's going to get the money and all that crap. But nobody benefits if it's competing standards or if it's just available, because if just Sony had like this high dynamic range thing, right? If it was exclusively licensed through them and just Sony movies were out like that, nobody cares. Like, who would ever get that TV? You're like, well, that's great, but you only watch Sony movies. No one knows what a Sony movie is. It has to be an industry standard. So I'm glad to see them doing this because I'm much more excited about the high dynamic range stuff and the color enhanced and frame rate enhancements of 4K TV than I am about the 4K resolution itself. So I'm hoping good things will come from the UHD Alliance and then it won't splinter apart into a bunch of petty squabbling and other crap. And then the final thing is, like, speaking of things that are sort of evergreen about CES, like you mentioned, just if we just repost the Verge story, every time I think about actually writing something about CES, which I actually do think about, I don't actually write anything, but I think about it. And then I think back to the post I wrote in 2013 on hypercritical.co, which is CES: worst products through software. And I don't want this to be an evergreen article. I want it to be, remember that moment in time when consumer electronics companies realized that they needed software in their products, and they were super bad at it, and every time they added software, it made their products worse. And I'm hoping this will be a time that passes. Maybe it will be a decade or something, but I want this article to be out of date and look antiquated and look old-fashioned. But this year, I think it still applies. Every consumer electronics product that is not made by a company with a computing platform, Google, Apple, Microsoft, maybe kind of even Amazon, those are pretty much the only companies, like companies that maintain, that have a software platform and that they maintain it and advance it. They're the only companies that can do software worth a damn. Every other company that tries to add software to their product, it just makes the product worse because the software is awful and it replaces something that wasn't quite as awful, and the new capabilities never make up for the difficulty of dealing with it. Like, if your refrigerator comes with software, it's going to be worse than your refrigerator without software, like guaranteed, because refrigerator makers have no idea what they're doing when it comes to software. Thus far, neither do TV makers. They're terrible about updates. They're terrible at bug fixes. And the product itself doesn't start off very good and doesn't get any better. So I'm not writing anything new about that. It's still true. I wish it wasn't. So that's CES for worst products through software.
Yeah, I'm not in the TV world, but I totally agree with that statement in other areas. I mean, things I've gotten off of Kickstarter that have like, oh, this is an oven thermometer that has an app on your phone to see the results. And it's like, and then I threw it away and bought a real oven thermometer with an actual display and this stupid thing. Like the microphone interface I got for a week and then returned because it was broken anyway. But like this thing that has this screen with just one button on it and everything else is controlled by software. And then of course the software is terrible. So I replaced it with this box that is covered in knobs and buttons, and it's way better and it will last way longer. I mean, just Oh, I hate software so much, and I'm a software developer, and I hate software. I mean, use software intelligently. Use software when it really does benefit things, but that is not everywhere, and that is not always necessary, and it is often better without it.
And the worst part is, like, even in the places where you could totally see the benefit, like, or things that have had sort of, visual interfaces for a long time, like, for example, thermostats or something, you're like, that's a perfect place for software, because having a bunch of little buttons under a panel that you open up on this little dinky screen, you're like, boy, if I could have real software to do this, that would be better. And the Nest approach is kind of tied up with also don't make it programmable or whatever, but so many opportunities exist for something where software really is appropriate, but awful software is worse than just give me a bunch of freaking buttons and a dial, right? And what you were talking about, like on the thermometer type thing, is like, this is actually not an appropriate place for software at this point. Just give me a mechanical device that works. And the cars are the best example, because like there are ample opportunities for good software to improve the experience inside a car, but they take the software and put it where it's not needed. And then the software that is there is usually pretty terrible. And, we all use cars. And so we're all just kind of suffering as companies that do not know how to make software, I guess, hopefully slowly learn to make software better. I don't know if they're even learning. I mean, like you just talked about the last show, the BMW key fob with a screen on it. Like, that is not an appropriate place for software, for something that's in your pocket that you want to feel, to be able to feel the buttons, or maybe you don't want to touch it at all. Like, yeah.
All right. And speaking of software, our friends at Rogue Amoeba released something new this week.
Audio Hijack 3.
Indeed.
It's not pro, though, so forget it.
Well, that just means it doesn't have Thunderbolt ports on it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
People don't get the joke. It used to be called Audio Hijack Pro, and with the version 3, they removed Pro from the name because it was just like, it's like Netscape Navigator Gold, Pro Gold. Yeah, we don't need the suffixes and the modifiers. We can just say Audio Hijacked, and it's version 3.
Yep, and I have been fiddling with it. I have not used it to record a podcast yet. I didn't have enough time today to get my, I guess workflow almost. A session, I think is what the term they use. I didn't have enough time to get my session squared away before we recorded tonight, but I'm hoping to, in the next week, be able to set it up so that it records not only a copy of just my mic, but also a copy of you guys as well. And this will be super helpful for analog. But it's really, really slick the way they've done the kind of workflowy interface where you're dragging boxes around. And it's again, a very gentle way of trying to do very powerful things, much like the workflow app that I've talked about quite a few times, both on my website and here on the show. It's a very cool idea, very well done. And the thought of writing that UI scares the crap out of me because I'm a terrible UI developer as it is. And writing something that complex with like that kind of a dynamic layout just scares the bejesus out of me. But it's cool.
I wouldn't just describe it as gentle. And by the way, this is not a paid sponsorship. We're saying this because we think this app is neat. And the reason I'm excited about this app is because it takes an idea that like concepts that have, been related to audio for a long time. And it's like, a lot of these capabilities more or less existed already in the previous versions of Audio Hijack, or that you could have done yourselves with the different audio things. The major innovation of this is kind of like, if people are familiar with Quartz Composer, is it lets you visually design the flow of audio. Like if you were to if you were to try to explain to somebody, what I need to have the audio from this source going into over here, and then I need to record into a file over there, but then be mixed with this one over here and have a volume adjustment and go through this output device, and you would draw it in an app, and you're like, boy, how the hell am I going to configure that in an app? You just take that diagram and you make it in this thing. They have these little blocks that you can pull out for sources of audio. They have a little meter block, which I think is genius and shows the greatness of this approach. Is like, what does the meter block do? Doesn't do anything. It lets you know if you're clipping in that source, right? And then you have adjusters for different channels and volume things, and you have a recorder where you can put the track down. You can put multiple tracks down into one recording, split them all into separate ones. The interface is the entire thing of this application. The capabilities were there, and that you could have used it with an old version of Audio Hijack or other applications. But take a look at the screenshots of this. If you do anything related to audio, and maybe you don't, maybe it's just a bunch of podcasters who care about this stuff. But if you do anything related to audio or recording audio, this one interface, this one window, like just drag a bunch of things and connect them with lines, lets anybody do things that previously almost nobody could do, because you'd have to understand like some crazy arcane interface and a bunch of weird vocabulary. It's like, this is all visual vocabulary. Very simple, very straightforward. I was super impressed by this.
Yeah, it's a very neat app, and I'm hoping to get everything squared away so I can use it to record this next week.
We should have held out, because they probably would have sponsored, and I could have done a good sponsor beat for them, but too late.
You just did.
Yeah. And you were, and Marco, you were on the beta for this, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I like it a lot. It's what I like about it, I said it in some blog post too, like in audio is a pretty, like dealing with audio and like, oh, well, I just need to record this and then run it through this mixer and combine it with this and then be able to mix this in and record over here and split this off and apply an EQ and a compressor over here. Like doing stuff like that can very quickly lead you into hardware complexity and just a hell of wires and cheap or expensive little boxes all over the place and lots of like just boxes all over your desk and complexity and not knowing where things are and costs. And this app is able to replace so much complexity, so much hardware, and even like if you try to do a lot of these things in software, there are like free open source things out there that will that you can do some of these things with, or that you can combine in certain ways to do some of these things. And they're usually way harder to set up, and you got to install these 3 different packages, and one of them is really made for Linux and all this stuff. Like you hit all these little bottlenecks and frustrations and limitations and just challenges in setting it all up. So to have it all in one app is pretty amazing. This kind of makes me sad, because like this is the kind of awesome utility that we will never see on iOS and that can never be in the Mac App Store. And those things make me very sad.
A second point I was going to bring up is like the innovation of this app. Like this is exactly like the original GUI. It's like previously I could not do this with a computer because it was too complicated. But now when you make all my files little pictures, now I can actually arrange them. Like I don't know how to type commands to move files. I can't keep, like simple things like file management. Once you made the files little pictures that people could drag around with a mouse, suddenly they were able to do it. And for professionals who are going to have actual audio hardware with the XLR interfaces or all that stuff, like this is not replacing a giant recording studio for them, but it's saying like you have a Mac that is capable of doing a lot of stuff in software that you can also do a better job of, a more fancy job of with hardware. But maybe you don't want to buy thousands of dollars worth of audio hardware, and that, like Marco said, that is a whole other world of complexity. What if you just want to do something like, I have a Mac, everything here is happening on the Mac, I've got a Skype call, I've got, a Google Hangout, I've got some music playing, I've got like, why can't I know my Mac is capable of this. It hears all the audio. I can route it in a simple way using the input and output control panels. Why can't I just do this one thing that I want to do? It's not that much more complicated. So I would say this is like, when I tweeted about this, I was like, if you don't have a big budget for hardware, but you want to do something like what Marco does with like playing some music and mixing it to a live stream and stuff like that, like, or, on the Incomparable where we just want to play clips on our clip show, play clips from past episodes, or drop in sound effects in like a game show type thing, you're not asking for much. It's pretty simple, but it's like, oh, I can add stuff in, but it won't record my sound effects. You'll just hear them over the Skype chat, or the only place I can get my sound effects is out of the completely mixed Skype chat, or I'll play this clip and the other people on the show won't hear it, but eventually it'll be in the final recording. Silly things like that are limitations of the simplicity of the way we can mix audio here. And providing an application that does that, it's just such an incredible shame. Like this is like the kind of innovative application that you'd expect from a great Mac developer, right? Can't be on the Mac App Store. Can't be on iOS because of the way it works, because it, hijacks the audio from other applications and stuff like that. And I understand, like, it doesn't have any kernel extensions or anything, but it's using, it's getting into other processes and like, grabbing audio from them. And I feel like it's my computer. There should be security restrictions about that. Like, oh, do you want to hijack audio from this application? Confirm that it's done, have some sort of system level thing that prevents, like, I feel like this application could be on the Mac App Store if Apple cared enough about the functionality it provides to provide sort of the gateways of like, oh, do you want to give this app access to contacts? The person says, yes, that app has access to contacts. That's the only kind of barrier I think you need. It's kind of sad that you cannot buy this in the Mac App Store. You have to buy it direct.
All right. I think we're good.
Thanks a lot to our 3 sponsors this week, Harvest, Backblaze, and Lynda.com, and we will see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. research, Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
And find out how much money Marco is saving from Go.
It isn't that impressive. It's like a few $100s a month. I mean, it's
That's what we want to know.
It's a few $100s a month.
There you go.
It's not like we're not talking thousands, like, because hosting Overcast was already inexpensive compared to like Instapaper or Tumblr or something like that. I mean, it's
But you say it like it's nothing. A few $100s a month is not nothing.
I mean, that's a car payment.
well, but in my last business, I was spending like $5,000 to $7,000 a month. So like for this one, like this is a lot smaller because it's like $500 to $700 a month as opposed to $1,000.
Oh, it's a pretty good bang for the buck, though. Like, how long did you spend rewriting it in Go? And then the savings will be realized, going forward. So you got a pretty good return on the investment and the time you spent to learn Go and rewrite this thing.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, I'm going to have to spend a little more time on it because the current model I have has a couple of little problems, but it's overall, it's been a huge win, and I learned a new language, and that is valuable too. And now I have a very, very good tool for certain types of problems in my tool belt, I guess. I learned something new, gave us something to talk about on the show here and there, and lets me save some money.
I mean, like John said, a few $100s a month, that's significant. That's impressive. And that's really awesome. And it's kind of crazy that you just choosing to attack this problem a little bit differently has had what I think to be a pretty big, tangible impact on your financial situation for Overcast. That's awesome. And who would have thought that ditching PHP would save you hundreds on server costs?
And just not even ditching all of it, just ditching it for like this one like hotspot, this one like major bottleneck that was a huge resource hog. That's why I like that I now have this in my tool belt, because now I know like problems like this, I have another way to attack them. I have something else that I know well enough and that I trust enough to do this kind of thing. That's now available to me, and that will enable certain new things. And like I didn't want to learn certain things like Python or Ruby that much because they didn't seem to provide a lot of enough of an advantage to make it worth me adding that complexity and having that burden of having to learn that over a few weeks and be dumping all that time into it. Go is different enough and good enough at certain things that it was worth it to me, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, the bad old Marco would have spent many more months arguing with everyone else about why he didn't need to rewrite it.
So true.
Go. Like you would have just spent like the amount of time and energy you would have spent defending your decision not to rewrite it in Go would very quickly dwarf the amount of time it actually took you to rewrite it in Go.
Oh yeah, no, this is what happens when there's a lot of money to be made on one side of an argument.
Yeah, well, it's all speculative. You'd be like, I don't think it'll be that much faster. Maybe I could reduce the number of machines from 1 to 2. Even now, you're saying it's not that much money, although I think it totally is. And then, the arguments you just made about having this in your tool belt and so on and so forth, we could have made those arguments and you'd be like, you hem and yaw. It doesn't seem like a big deal. It's not a whatever. So I hope you've learned from this that, trying new things is awesome and saves you money. And the lesson I usually take from that is, I get this at work all the time. You have to do the calculation of how much energy will it be for me to argue against this versus how much energy will it take for me to just do it. And a surprising amount of time, it's more exhausting for me to think about arguing against it than it is to just do it. It's actually less work because then you're like, whatever, it's done. When it's done, the argument is over. There's no argument to be had, and it was less mentally exhausting than having to try to, argue about this.
Well, I mean, and in my case, it was really just about I'm not going to take a sideways step and learn a language that is generally similar to PHP and what it does well and what it doesn't do well. because there's not a whole lot of upside for that.
Well, we'll work on that. We'll work on that one next. Like I know that's what you think, but
but like with Go, like the reason I went to it was because I had this problem that I was doing that PHP is especially bad at. Like if it was just something that PHP is kind of inconvenient for or not that well designed for, that's less of a gain. That's more like, well, in an ideal world on an infinite timescale thing, maybe I would do something else. But in most cases, most of the problems I have to solve with web apps, the other languages don't solve it better than PHP enough to make it worth the jump and the hassle of having to rewrite things. I mean, this is going to cost me probably 2 months of web programming time, because I not only had to rewrite the crawlers and debug all the problems that came with them, but I also have to rewrite a lot of these supporting tools, things like the logging infrastructure and like the things that allow me to check and see when feeds were last crawled, how often, monitoring if there's delays, if there's queue congestion, being able to force one to crawl immediately. Like there's all sorts of like little infrastructure supporting pieces that tie into the crawling system that I now have to modify or rewrite because it's a different system. So it is a pretty expensive change up front. It will pay off over time, but it's certainly taking a lot of time. And so that's why like I'm not going to like rewrite the whole rest of the app in Python or something, because there doesn't seem to be enough benefit to doing that for the amount of time and work it would take. If I'm faced with a problem that PHP does really badly, like lots of parallel network requests, now I'm not gonna use it for that, you know. So that's where the benefit is.
When you sell Overcast, your next product, you won't, the parts that are appropriate for Go, you won't write in PHP to begin with, and it'll be Go from the beginning. And the same thing with your queue management stuff. Like if we ever cross the next hurdle, which is like third-party products for dealing with queues of things and managing the queues and dealing with failures and reporting and logging. There are lots of infrastructure type tools that deal with that. I know you probably don't like anything, would rather just write the straightforward thing yourself. But in the similar way that if you were to try to use one of those, you'd be like, oh, I have this infrastructure that already works. Now I have to do this thing. And now I have this weird system where some of them use this system, some of them use that. It's like, again, the next time you do a project, if you have that tool in your tool belt, then you will say, okay, this part of the system I'm going to write in PHP, this part I'm going to write in Go, this thing I'm going to use, this queue system and this whatever. Like, we'll work on the third party stuff next. But like, I feel like having it, this is one of the things that having a crappy job forces you to deal with, because if you have either one crappy job or even better, multiple crappy jobs, crappy meaning just like regular job jobs where you work for somebody else, you don't get to pick half the time what you're working with. What database you're working with, what logging infrastructure you're working with, what operating system, you don't get to pick, right? And a lot of times you work with crappy things, but eventually you work with a whole bunch of different things, so that when you come to a new situation, you're like, look, I've tried these 5 things and these 7 things in this realm or whatever, and you're forced to have experience with lots of different things, and so you have a deeper tool chest to pull from. Whereas if you're not forced by some pointy-haired boss to use a particular technology, it's always up to you to do like the cost benefit and like, I'm the only person here. Is it really worth me learning to do this on my own? So on and so forth. It's much harder you don't have the time to just screw around with stuff and try everything out and survey the landscape. You really just have to go with what you know. And so now you overcoming that hurdle to say, I am going to screw around for a little while just because I think there'll be a benefit from it. It's a sort of a slow motion version of having a series of crappy JOB jobs where you're forced to use 50 different technologies.
It's so true. I also think it's kind of funny for you to just kind of wave your hand at, oh, it won't be any better than PHP.
Well, that's not what I said. I said it won't be better enough to make it worth the transition costs.
Okay, even then, I think that's a very bold claim for not for Go necessarily, because Go, but to just kind of wave off, I don't know, Python as an example, and just assume that it's not going to be that beneficial. I think that's pretty bold. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. It just means it's pretty bold. And I am proud of you and remain proud of you for having explored Go. And I echo what John is saying, that I think this is a baby step in the right direction for you, understanding that you don't necessarily need to personally solve every problem under the sun. And there's more than one way to skin a cat, and that's okay.
The part where Marco's right about this thing, though, is like, it's not even, Python versus PHP. It's that he found the hotspot, right? Like, you reduced your number of servers by like half, didn't you? So It doesn't matter how much better something is than PHP. This was clearly the hotspot. Like, he's not going to have it again, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, so that's the, again, that's just true of anything, not just working at yourself, but especially when you're working at yourself. Put your effort towards the thing that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. And so if you have the number of servers, it's silly to expect that the next change will also have the number of servers, because eventually it'll have, 1/1000th of a server, and that's not going to happen, right? So decide where the bottleneck is and address that. And then, if the current state of things is fine, then your work is done. You don't need to work further. I don't think, for example, if he decided the hotspot is PHP, I need to replace PHP with Python, he would not have the number of his servers. That's the type of thing, even without using the language, you can kind of ballpark and say, are these at the same level of abstraction? Go is clearly lower level, and it's clearly giving him something that PHP wasn't, that he knew would be a big bang for the buck.
Yeah, definitely.
We've been doing WatchKit a lot. Lots of WatchKit this week. I'm liking it a lot.
Yeah?
Because it's so limited that there's not a lot of pressure on me to make something amazing. There's not a lot of pressure on me to cram the entire app into this because I just can't. It is not possible to. So the limits I have are very challenging and in that way kind of interesting to me.
Can you do a thing with do you have accelerometer access on the watch? If I shake my wrist?
Nope, no sensors.
No, that would be a lot of the time when I'm listening to a podcast or something, I've talked to you about this before, I hate the stupid little clicker, going forward and back of doing 2 clicks and 3 clicks when you have cold fingers, and I don't know if I accidentally hold too long and it ends up being the click and the hold. I know all the patterns, but I just can't make my fingers do it with the stupid Apple clicker. But you run out of gestures. You don't have enough, there's not enough input, right? You don't have enough buttons. So a lot of the time it's I just missed the last few seconds of what was said on a podcast. I would shake my wrist for it to go back 7 seconds and just have that be the one unambiguous, vigorous wrist shaking. I feel like you could make it vigorous enough so you didn't have to, so you wouldn't accidentally do it or whatever. And that is much easier than me trying to triple click the stupid headset thing to go back and hear what somebody said.
I have a prototype class that's a pocket tap recognizer that will try to recognize if you tap the phone while it's in your pocket. If you just hit it with your finger from the outside of your jeans or whatever. And I got that working decently, but I could never get it working reliably enough to actually ship it. It's just not good enough. There's too many false responses in either direction. Falsely detecting if you just step really hard as a tap, and missing real taps. I just could not get it to work properly.
Yeah, and it's kind of small for gestures. That's why I was thinking the one input you have is the shake, and the shake to undo is silly, in iOS. But I'm pretty sure I've never accidentally done it, and I very frequently have A, done it on purpose, and B, shaken an app in the dim hope that this app will actually support undo through shake. And I'm really excited when it does, and when it doesn't, I'm just sad.
You've never kicked that off accidentally?
Never.
Oh, I do it all the time because I'll be holding my iPad. So I'll be in bed on my back, holding my iPad up with both hands, using it. And then I'll kind of drop it intentionally to let it land on my chest so I can type or something like that and not support the weight of the iPad with my hands anymore.
I have an iPad 3. If I did that, it would break my ribs.
That's true. That is an excellent point, sir. But yeah, every time I do that deliberate drop onto my chest in order to make it so that I don't have to support it anymore, then it kicks the undo. Do you want to undo the typing you just did? And it drives me nuts every time. But as a developer, I know that it makes perfect sense why that's happening. And it's not my fault, but it's kind of my fault.
Yeah, for all I know, I am accidentally triggering it. I'm just doing it in apps that don't support undo. But I've never seen stuff go away on my screen and realize it's because I jostled the thing too much. And like I said, I very frequently, after accidentally performing some action, just futilely shake the device. Even if it doesn't undo, it lets me get revenge, I guess, on the device. You stupid phone. Didn't mean to tap that. I didn't mean to tap that.
No, so I've been doing a lot of WatchKit stuff. I'm just going to talk about it now. Screw it. I like it a lot. I think it's important for people's expectations of what WatchKit apps will actually be to actually know how it works a little bit. So basically, when Apple Watch launches in a few months or whenever, it doesn't matter. Developers can only, Apple can do whatever they want with their apps, but third-party developers can only make watch apps with WatchKit. So what this is the WatchKit is actually an extension that runs on the phone from the main like parent app, and it runs in the background. Whenever you select like the app's icon on the watch, it launches the WatchKit extension on the phone to like, you know, boot up, give it data, and control it. And then the third-party developer's code never actually runs on the watch. All the third-party code is running on the phone, and it's literally just like it's reading data from the parent app on the phone. If you're making network calls, it's also happening on the phone, and then you send commands to the watch to just update the screen. And the watch is playing through a static storyboard where you've defined your controllers and everything and the elements they have. Those are all static. You can't generate elements dynamically at runtime. You can hide and show them, but you can't generate new ones. And so the phone is basically commanding the watch over Bluetooth how to update your interface in it. So it's sending over commands like set this label's text to this string. And like all the commands, it's hilarious. All the commands, they're write only. You can't read from them. So like you can set the color of the text, but you can't read it back because it's literally just like this thin layer on top of this command structure that's just like telling the watch how to update its interface. So there's a number of challenges with this, and the biggest one is the latency because Bluetooth has some latency. It's in modern Bluetooth, it's pretty small, but there is some latency, and there's also just a lot of there's pretty limited bandwidth there. And the watch, as far as we can tell from hints and things here and there, the watch is not going to keep your app running for very long. Like as soon as you stop looking at it, it closes, the extension closes, and everything's cut off. So there's going to be major challenges in just getting these watch apps to be dynamic and to be useful and to be rich. Because like if you're like sending over images, even like I'm having this problem with the album art of like how do you send over album art in a way that is efficient, and you can have it cache up to 20 megs of album art for you, and it's not a lot, and like all these like little limitations, little problems. But overall, the biggest thing about it is just this lack of dynamic interface and the latency involved in updating things, and everything is based around trying to minimize that. Also, if you're really chatty over that protocol, over the Bluetooth, you're going to keep the radios on, and you're going to burn a bunch of battery life on both sides. So there's a lot of challenges, a lot of limitations here. I would say for the first wave of third-party apps, which I think is going to be a year roughly, I would say don't expect a lot of dynamic interaction. It is like a static menu that you're dealing with, or like static interface elements. There's almost nothing dynamic that you can do. I would not expect a whole lot from games. I think some games will work on it. Things where you can have very simple controls, like which of these 5 actions do you want to do next? Touch this button. Like that's it. Like there's not a lot of interaction that's going to be reasonably possible with this system. On the plus side, it's really quick to develop for, and it's really easy to get something going. And it's I think it's a smart move overall from Apple, and the tools are pretty good. There's a couple of bugs here and there, but overall, for this limited set of things that it's doing, it's pretty well suited for that. So I'm actually really happy about it. I'm as I mentioned earlier, I'm happy that I don't have to kind of be forced to cram the whole app into it because I just can't. So instead, I can do this limited subset that I can do in a month or two and have a really great app out there and be done with it. So overall, I like it. Again, set expectations low if you're going to be buying one of these things. Don't expect a whole lot from third-party apps, but what you have, I think, will be interesting and certainly will be enough for the first year.
That's good for Apple because what they want to say is, boy, the Apple Watch is out, and already there are insert very large number of third-party applications for it. Because if it's really easy for you to add, like, why don't you just add trivial Apple Watch support? Well, all Apple Watch support at this point is trivial without native apps and stuff like that, and the incredible limitations. So if you make it easy for people to go, that's a nice bullet point we could add to our iPhone app. We could say we have watch support, and then everyone is thinking of, is there anything sensible I can show on the watch? And if there's anything remotely sensible, no matter how simple it is, you don't feel too bad because, look, everyone has to be simple. So I think this will help Apple have a lot of quote-unquote phone apps, iOS apps that support the phone, watch apps, iOS apps that support the watch out of the gate, because that's what they want to say. They want to say, our platform is exciting, it's popular. And if it was possible to make full-fledged applications, then if you just made some silly thing that was barely interactive, you would look bad. But now everyone will look bad together, and comparatively, you'll look good.
Yeah, I mean, it really does serve their interests very well, and I think it helps us too. I mean, I know a lot of developers are probably very frustrated with the limitations of of the very long list of things you can't do, things you don't have access to. Like, for instance, as if your phone moves out of range of the watch, from what we've been told, we don't know because we don't have hardware yet, but from what we've been told, if your phone loses that Bluetooth connection to the watch, so like if you go running with it or whatever, your app just terminates, like it just ends because it can't keep the UI updated anymore. Like it's like the head gets cut off, like it just ends. So nothing can run detached from a phone that's third party. And again, there's so many limitations like on the things, the kinds of things you can't do with the interface is very long, and we still, like, in the simulator they have attempted to simulate latency with some of these commands, but it's just artificial insertion of like a sleep command in the UI, so we don't really know what the latency will be like on a real device. Like, like if I'm showing a list of podcast episodes like I do in the playlist screen, I want to have artwork on each one showing you what show they're from. At this point, I mean, and I'm compressing the images down so they're really tiny. They're like, a couple of kilobytes each maybe, but in the simulator, it takes a long time to load that. And I don't know if that's a bug. I don't know if that's because it's simulating latency like per request instead of by byte size. Or I don't know if that's really how latent it's going to be, in which case I'm going to have to change that design entirely.
You got to think like Yosemite and iTunes 7 and just average the color of the album art, pick one color out of it, and then just set a square to that one color.
So I have an honest question, and you may choose not to answer it, but you've talked several times about how limited WatchKit is, which makes sense. Can you give a couple of examples of things you really wish you could do or have tried to do but couldn't make work with the current set of WatchKit limitations?
Oh, sure. I mean, one of the biggest ones is I can't do my play animation at all. I mean, I could render it to a bunch of images and try to send the commands over to be like, all right, set this bar of the EQ to be this height.
No. Put them all on the storyboard, and you just cycle between those 4 frames in the storyboard.
Right.
Done.
Exactly.
Remember the old, I think the old, a lot of UIs do this where they want it to look like level meters, but they just have like 4 images that they just cycle between randomly. Put that in the storyboard. It's all static, Marco. You're overthinking it. No one will know. No one knows what the waveform is supposed to look like.
That's how Apple does it when in iOS 7 and on the watch, when they have their music app and they have the little now playing animation bars. Those are fake.
Yeah, I think the one in the QuickTime 7 player is real, isn't it?
I don't know. I think so. But the ones in iOS 7, like the little 3-bar animation when you on the now playing item, that's totally fake. And like seeing that and being annoyed that it was fake is what made me try to do my own that was real and see that it worked.
But the fake ones do serve a purpose. Like I'm joking about doing a fake one with storyboards, but like something to let people know that audio is playing is probably a good idea. And if you do, I guess it's probably much better to do it with a static thing, like a red light on the camera that shows camera is on or whatever. But people are, if you show anyone that looks anything like a level meter, people know, oh, that means something is playing now. And if I can't hear it, something is screwed up because maybe my headphones don't work. Is the music playing? Like, you would think most people could just look at it and see the pause symbol and say, of course it's playing. Otherwise there wouldn't be a pause symbol. But I found my experience that people do not recognize that reality that's staring them in the face. But if you show a level meter anywhere, they know something should be playing it. If I'm not hearing it, something's broken.
Right. I mean, so Casey, to answer your question, limitations I've hit directly, again, one of the biggest ones is just not knowing how much latency I can actually expect in real life when sending images over and stuff like that. But some of the actual hard limits are things like I can't even show efficiently the seconds remaining indicator because there's like a built-in widget that you don't have to keep updating for counting up or down to a certain time or a certain time interval or showing the current time. So I can't, the only way for me to have it count down with the actual seconds remaining is to update it every time that number changes. So at least once per second, which I probably can't and probably shouldn't be doing. So instead, I have it actually update a minutes remaining counter. And whenever the number of minutes remaining changes, I send an update over the Bluetooth and have it update the label to show that. And I have a progress bar in the current mock-up that only it's images and it only has, like I think 150 increments across the screen. And so whenever like the progress through the episode changes by enough to matter to be worth a couple of pixels, I update that image to be the new value.
Oh, you're still doing better than Windows 95.
That's true. Yes, that was just palette cycling, right?
No, the Windows 95 is the segmented progress bars.
Oh yeah.
And you have more than 100. It didn't have 150 segments.
Right. So there's limitations like that I just can't get around. The biggest limitation is the width of the screen is just really narrow. Like you just can't fit a lot on the screen, and I've managed to make it work. I think I won't know until I actually get one of these watches and start using it, but I think I've managed to make it work acceptably. But that is, the hardest challenge is just a design challenge right there. But then there's also there's other little details. So if you have a navigation stack, so you have your root controller, and then it pushes when you select an element on the table view, it pushes the new one, and then you select again, it pushes another one. Any of the ones that are below the current item in the stack that you've pushed something on top of, those stop receiving UI updates, and those can no longer send UI updates for themselves. So let's say you have at the base of the navigation hierarchy a list of the podcasts you subscribe to. Then you push on top of that the playlist view and the now playing view. So you're in the middle of a podcast. The list of podcasts you subscribe to changes for some reason. Something new comes into the download, you delete one, whatever the case, the list changes. So now the root controller, which is not currently shown on screen because it's buried below the now playing, the root controller needs to update itself. It's still memory. It will recognize if you have your data layer set up, it'll recognize that there's been a change. But you have to check to see if it's active, and if it's not active, you have to just enqueue that and just set a Boolean flag somewhere saying this is invalid data that I have now, and I need to reload it next time I'm shown. And then next time it's shown, you have to check for that flag and say, oh, if I'm invalid, reload the data. All this stuff, this doesn't really exist in UIKit on the phone. These problems don't really exist. You can just kind of do things anytime you want, and it's fine. The watch is really the WatchKit communication is really basic. As I said, it's write only. It's very limited. It's all just sending remote desktop commands over the wire, basically. And so there's a lot of stuff you have to do very manually. A lot of stuff you just have to just choose not to do, or choose to do in very minimal or clever ways. And that's kind of why I like it, because I enjoy challenges like that.
Then you're going to get screen flicker, though, when you go back to the podcast list, only once that thing is active will it even have a chance to update its UI. So as soon as you go back to that screen, if that Boolean is set, you're just now within a couple, fractions of a second, it's going to update everything. Whereas before it could have been updated behind the scenes, sort of. So now you're putting that UI flicker in people's faces, which is kind of crappy.
Yeah, and again, it sucks, and I don't think there's anything I can do about it. But again, there's nothing you can do.
Someone needs to discover the hack of if you just make the currently active view larger than the actual screen, and sort of like CSS sprites for UI.
Yeah, right.
I'm not really pushing a view. I'm just shifting the viewport. And so really this view is always active. So I can update the podcast list whenever it's an update.
Yep. Nope. Can't even do that.
Yeah. I'm sure they would reject your app if you tried to anyway.
I would love to do the force press gesture on the watch, which is it functionally, it's kind of like a right click. It shows that menu of overlaid icons.
That's when you use the force to press your watch.
Yeah. You just concentrate really hard and this menu comes up, and that you can only do it per screen. You can't force press on, say, a table list item and get options for that item. You just have to do it for the whole screen. This screen has the force press.
Yeah, the force press is on the screen, but then it ignores what part of the screen your finger is touching. And I can kind of see that, because what if that gesture becomes part of the vocabulary of using the watch, it's kind of weird to make people care about where their finger is on the screen. You know what I mean? That's two different things, because then you'd have to be thinking, is this one of those force presses in this app where it doesn't matter where my finger is, or is this one of those force presses in this app where it does matter where my finger is? Now you can just shove your meaty paw into the watch and just press it and it will do something.
Yeah, exactly. But really, I was not really that excited about the watch until I started playing with WatchKit. Now I'm very excited. Now that I see what I can do with not that much effort, and how useful that would probably actually be in practice, which I think is pretty useful. There's a lot of situations where I'm walking my dog, I'll bundle up in the cold, and I'm man, I would really like to have a basic little watch controller right now. A lot of situations where this is coming up where I'm like, this would actually be nice to have. So I'm looking forward to it.
Gotta wait 5 years before we can live in the real future where we can have a great view of your nose hair when you're out on your walk, because you'll have a live video on your watch, just like Dick Tracy, and we'll all be able to see up each other's noses.
That sounds awesome.
That's the future.
I can't wait.
Yeah, because like the whole thing, you just look at your watch, and your wrist vibrates a little bit, and you pick up your wrist, and there's your wife's tiny little face on there telling you something, and she can see right up your nose.
Yay.
It's the future.